I'm going to assume you can see it unless I hear otherwise.
All good, thanks, Richard.
It's all good, is it? Okay, great. So in terms, as you may remember, for the previous cycle, we did a data retrospective as well. And just really it's to look back at the process of from sending you data right through to the loading of the data, and then any issues you may have during the testing with the data. So the things we'd like to cover in this meeting are looking at the impact and effectiveness of the previous data retrospective. So I think we had quite a detailed number of things that we worked on and we fixed. And so just to go through those and sort of concentrate on a couple, just to, show that it was actually effective. What we'd also like to do is walk through the new data creation and augmentation process, which went very well last time, and just sort of look and see if there's any potential risk areas there, but I don't think there should be too many. And then we've got a few issues that we know that were encountered in cycle 3. We'd also like to give you the opportunity to maybe things that didn't go as well as we'd hoped, and that you had, that you'd like to tell us about them, and we can make a note of them and get some actions in place to prevent them from happening again, or to improve the process. And then, at the end of each section, we'll be very happy to take any questions you might have. We're a relatively small audience, so we can be a bit interactive, and that's fine. And if there's anything, that we can improve, or there's some quick wins that we can get from things that might not be visible to us right now, that'll be really helpful. So that's the planned agenda. So just looking, I won't go through everything here, but we had quite a lot of stuff that came out of the data retrospective for cycle 2, and we completed everything. And I think we had a much better cycle 3. And some of the things that I've identified specifically from this, I've just put on the next slide. So as I said, the initial thing was really we had just less data issues to resolve. So it had very good feedback from participants and central parties. We'll go into this in a bit more detail, but we only actually sent out 2 corrected versions, and they were not substantial changes. We had we created a new process because of limitations of MPANs in the data cut. There just weren't the amount of MPANs in the right conditions to meet the requirements. So we had to do that. We also had a much more linear plan. So we made sure that each part of the plan was completed before we moved on to the next part of the plan. So I think if you remember in cycle 2, we had something, 20 odd versions of the data. And that was because we were fixing validation issues of MPRS at the same time, and then sending out new versions to you, which was not very effective. So we fixed that. We also have tried, even in the corrected versions. So we sent out 2 versions, I think, very early in the first week. And within those, we tried to be very, very clear on who had to load those versions, where they were located, and sort of, release notes and descriptors of everything. So it was hopefully a lot more clear, because I know we weren't as good as that before. We also had quite a lot of schema checks we ran through. So every bit of data we produced, we ran through schema checkers, and we built in a lot more time in the plan for checking. So all these things, I think, made the last version in cycle 3, the last, the data we provided a lot better. So yeah, so I think hopefully we'll then transpose those things that are applicable into the next version. So I can't see if there are any questions, but I'll just open up for any questions, and if Hannah, you can help if there are. Assume silence.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, assume silence is good. Okay, so I'm just going to ask John just to talk us through a little bit about the data creation and augmentation process that we're going to use for the next cycle, and that we did use for some of the MPANs of the last cycle.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So this is sort of more looking forward now, but it's sort of building on the lessons that we've learned over the sort of cycle 1, 2, and 3 data load. But I think this is very much predicated on the cycle 3 data load that we did to create the majority of the import-export MPANs, some related MPANs, some single MPANs. But what we effectively did, and I think this is a reason why we had 2 versions of data rather than 47 or whatever we had in cycle 2, was that we effectively followed the new connection process to populate the data across all of the central systems, and we also had sort of the relevant central systems, so that was CSS, DSP, and MPRS, connected up to one another while we did the data load. So rather than having to load sort of disparate files and make sure that they were aligned, we effectively used the native sort of business process to create the data in the systems, but also then synchronize the data across those systems. So we're planning to use that exact same process again for both NFR testing, because we do need to create 8,000 MPANs for NFR. So we need to give out 1,000 MPANs to each cohort for NFR testing. But we also need to create a new set of MPANs when we get to regression testing as well. So we'll use that same process at that point in time as well. But what we'll effectively do is, we're creating new MPANs with the correct attributes. We're then going to load that across NPRS and in the context of, not in the context of NFR, because we don't really have a CSS or a DSP around in SITB, but certainly for regression testing, we'll be loading it across those 3 systems first. We'll be making sure that the data is fully loaded, complete and accurate, and then we'll be providing data out to you guys to load into your systems. Now, I think a key bit of feedback was that obviously setting up the MTDs has been an overhead. So what we have been developing over the past month or so is the ability to produce DTS, meter technical details, that we can provide through to you guys as well, so you can effectively load them as you would standard sort of change of agent at that point in time. And I think the rationale for that is obviously for NFR testing, we're going to be doing, and for some of the operational testing as well, we're obviously, looking to do reasonably high volumes of tests. We need the data set up correctly in your systems and aligned across, suppliers, metering services, data services. So I think that sort of really drives that requirement for us to be able to provide the meter technical details, so you're not having to create them yourself. So what we will be doing for all traditional MPANs and advanced MPANs, we'll be sending across 150s, 149s, 268s. If it's an MPAN that's in a pre-migrated state and it's advanced non-half hourly, we'll be sending across 313s and so on and so forth. So that's something that Wheatley's have helped us with in terms of getting some reference data, and we're then going to use that then to generate aligned DTS messages to all of the MPAN data that we're creating. And we'll also make sure from an unmetered point of view that that effectively will have inventories that are generic inventories effectively that will set up. So, there won't be any issues there with then generating D0388 files across to the unlimited data services when required. So hopefully that will mean that, when you guys come to load the data for NFR testing, you'll have like the full data set, if you like, and there won't be any need then for you to have to create MTD data, because there isn't the time effectively, for the amount of data that you've MPANs that you've got to set up to then be able to use. So I think obviously this is something new. When we do new stuff, it obviously always introduces a bit more risk. So it's something that we're currently building and testing at the moment, and probably mid-January we may look to send some example files out to people so people can sort of verify that they look they look correct. It would be very helpful if people could use sort of feed in a bit of their own expertise in terms of validating this before we get to the data loading later in the year. Hi, Stuart.
Hi, John. Yeah, just a question on that. Obviously, we spoke about it before. One of the issues that we've encountered within the last phase of testing was misalignment of the meters for primary and secondary MPANs. So to be really specific, and possibly this isn't the right time, but on an IF33, a primary and secondary MPAN had the same meter reference, the same meter serial number, and then when we got the IF36, they had different serial numbers, which then caused, because we weren't, following the standard process, it was part of the data load, that caused some fallout. I guess this is more of a request than in terms of this data load that you're describing here. Can we try and make sure that some of the related, import export stuff is included within that initial trial, just to make sure that we don't trip over that sort of thing?
Yeah, Stuart. So I think what we'll look to do is provide some sort of reference data out to people that will cover most of the the main sort of MPAN type. So I think we'll have a single MPAN with a single meter. We'll have a single MPAN with for example, a main check meter. We'll have import export, which might have 2 meters attached to both supplies, which should be the same, which will then have the right register configurations, and then we'll do the same for related. So yeah, we'll look to provide examples of all of those complexities, because what we are trying to do is obviously, as part of creating the MTDs, we then have to create realistic MTDs. So if it's advanced, then we'll be looking to create advanced meter setups that have a main and check meter, that we include that we make sure that we set them up with the right number of registers. So we've got active import export, reactive import registers set up. So I think what we will do is look to do that, and then obviously that it will be very helpful if you guys can then verify that those are set up as expected.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Because it is quite complex. It's more complex than I hoped it would be, maybe. But I think we are sort of there or thereabouts at the moment in being able to do that. But obviously we did, to your point, then we need to make sure that obviously the unique IDs, obviously the MPANs and the meter serial numbers primarily, obviously flow through all of the different data files then that we're providing out to you. Now I think because we're creating these MPANs from scratch and we're not relying on effectively the EES data set, which is what we've used previously, what we're effectively doing is setting up these what we call golden MPANs, which might be a set of records that build all these flows that have the right attributes in for the type of MPAN we're creating. If we get that right, effectively what we're doing then is replicating that maybe 300 times the same record, but we're changing then the unique identifiers within that record. So we'll have unique MPANs, clearly we'll have unique meter serial numbers, unique addresses and so on, but that sort of core base data will be common across all the records. So that's what we're really looking to validate, is that the golden MPAN record that we create is obviously right, because that's what we're going to base the replication of the test data on. So verifying those records is where we're sort of looking for a bit of support from you guys, just to make sure that those records are correct and as expected.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Has anybody else got any other questions on this sort of approach and slides before we move on?
Yeah, John. So I have a question on the meter technical detail files. So sometimes we, as a metering service, are getting requests from the data service to add the check meters. And also in some cases, we have to add multiple channels for some of the tests. So how do we deal with that? So are we going to get the meter technical details with a different set of combinations as we can choose for any particular test, or we can request when we need
so
that?
what we're doing, and this is specifically for NFR testing and then regression testing, we're going to create effectively a difference. The MPAN attributes that we create, we'll take that into account. So we may have one MPAN type that's advanced main check reactive power. And so when you receive the MTDs for that, we'll have 2 meters associated to the MPAN, and both of those meters will then have, an array of active and reactive channels within them.
Okay. Also, so in case of installing any new meters as part of the test, so we are currently choosing random serial numbers because we don't have any new meters available, standalone meters. So is there any chance that we can get some new meter serial numbers which we can use in case of the installations?
Well, there isn't any validation in any of the central systems that a meter serial number has to be unique. So really, you guys should just be, if you're doing like a new connection, for example, where you'd be creating the MTDs, sort of replicating a meter install on your side, then you can just use any I think it's 10 character 10 character string for the meter serial number. There shouldn't be any constraints on it having to be unique.
Okay, yeah, we can continue doing that then. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, because as I say, because it's not, there isn't any validation in MPRS, for example, that requires the serial number to be unique.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, thanks.
Good stuff. Yeah, so unless there's any other questions, Richard, we'll probably move on.
Okay, I think we covered some of this already, so we'll use the same MPANs will be created and used for SIT non-functional, SIT operational, and regression. We're going to create about 8,000 MPANs, and these will be loaded in SIT B and shared between the 2 phases. So this is for SIT non-functional and SIT operational. And we'll reuse those MPANs in the regression test cycle but they'll be loaded into SIT A. So we'll give approximately 1,000 MPANs per cohort. Same process as before in terms of how we provide them, and regression data will be prepared in a legacy state. So I'll just give a couple of seconds to see if there's anything there that surprises anybody or any questions on that. Okay. Okay, so what we wanted to do, so from the perspective of what we know about and that we've had sort of reported to us, these are the issues that we had in the last data load. So if there's other things that are not sort of niche things and you think, we're going to also talk about the MPAN tracker as well, but in general, these are the things. So these are the 2 data errors we had. We had one where there was some data, MPAN data missing for cohort A and H, and this was basically we had an error in our data sharing program which just omitted it. The impact was quite low as we managed to rectify that pretty quickly, and we shared a new version and we fixed it. So we don't expect that to happen again. We then also had an issue, and I think we've quite clearly, stated what the action was, who that affected and what we were going to do. The second error was sender correlation ID within the IF36s for secondary related MPANs was incorrect. And again, we had an error. Impact was low. We got the new version out within a day, I think, and that's fixed in the next version. So I suppose these are things that we would expect to be issues. I mean, sorry, we would expect some issues, but obviously minimizing them is important. So the next things, which I've kind of lumped under other, but most of them are sort of MPAN related from the tracker. The first one is we still notice that there are participants updating the spreadsheets in, let's say, a user unfriendly way, which is impacting other users. So we've sent out some comms and instructions, and we are continuing to look at that. So there's a few things we're going to do. We're going to look at further protection on the MPAN trackers to prevent people updating things they shouldn't. We are going to put all the cycles into one tracker, and then hopefully we'll sort of review it again after a week or so and see if there's any further feedback. So we're quite, we're quite focused on getting that right. Nigel, I see you had a question.
Yeah, sorry, Richard. It was just we were going to ask about how if it would be possible to take the sheet more using, standard Excel protection functionality,
Yeah.
stop people deleting, moving columns around, and just allow autofilter to run. That was all. It's kind of we've seen that. That was just going to be the ask, really.
Yeah, I take that on board completely, Nigel. And we're going to do what we're going to do is, as I said, we're going to consolidate all the trackers into one. We're going to look at how we can make it more user friendly, and we're also going to put
just to clarify, Rich, we're not going to consolidate all the trackers. We're proposing to consolidate the migration tracker, the original single MPAN tracker, and then the linked import export tracker, but obviously add some extra columns so people will search on, I want a migration MPAN first and then the other attributes. But we will leave the the settlements tracker completely separate, and we will leave the new connection tracker completely separate as well, because they are quite different.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, John. Sorry, I should have specified that. Yeah. So where we can, we're consolidating, where it just makes it easier for everything to be in one place. But we also look at the protection as well. Yeah, I mean, the second point kind of goes into that as well. We're going to, make the tracker more user friendly, and we potentially will have another session on that if it's, if people are still having problems finding MPANs. The final one is that, but MPANs are getting burned through quite quickly. They can be used more than once, and in certain instances, so we just need to keep thinking about that and understanding that we haven't got an everlasting supply. So unfortunately we do there is a lead time to producing MPANs. So if we do run out of MPANs, we would have to do something to that would be impactful. We try and minimize the impacts, but at the moment we don't see that as happening. But we just ask for your support in ensuring that we keep the MPANs that we have and we reuse them where possible.
Yeah, because I think just to build on that, there's obviously a lot of tests that involve import export that if you take consumption tests, there could be you could use the same set of MPANs to do multiple tests. Likewise, some of the other testing that's even requiring change of agents back and forth. MPANs that you use for a switch into yourself, you could then reuse those MPANs for other testing that's just within the cohort as well. So I think there's lots of ways where we can try and sort of reuse MPANs wherever possible, because there are some areas where and a lot of this has been driven by the defects. So all of the import export related tests that were attempted over the last couple of weeks that subsequently then failed for the IF36 issue we had, we've effectively having to have to write some of those off now because they're in corrupted state. So I think it's just working around the sort of the finite resources that we do have. And then to the other point as well, obviously there is an overhead in setting those MPANs up in the first place. So if we it obviously reduces the overhead as well then on people having to set up MTDs and other data to start that test. Once we've got a fully populated MPAN, let's try and make full use of it.
Thanks, John, for that. Okay, so yeah, so I think those were the main things we wanted to cover. As I said, we were in reasonably good shape after the last data load. So our recommendations are we're going to continue with our learnings. We're going to make sure that we have a linear plan, schema checkers, use the new MPAN process, better version control, and all the things that we've had fed back to us before. We're going to continue improving those things. We are also, as a data team and more behind the scenes, but it does make our process more efficient, is automating the new MPAN creation process. So we are building automation routines. The only thing that hopefully you'll see out of this is that data will be more accurate, and also it will be able to give you versions early so that you can have a look at the data, and then as we've just talked about, the MPAN tracker improvements and MPAN usage guidance, where possible, to just improve that and make it easier, really. So that was everything we wanted to cover. We didn't have a massive amount of feedback. Well, people didn't really respond and come back to us with too much. Obviously, we've had some feedback around the meter technical details. We've had some feedback around the MPAN tracker, and those are the key things. I think we had some feedback from PPC that the process was smoother in the last cycle. But yeah, if you have anything that you can think of now, please feel free just to put up your hand and ask the question, or if you want to feedback to us after the meeting, just feedback to PPC or the test mailbox. We had a question.
Yeah,
Thanks,
hi, Richard. Thanks. I guess this was more about so two things. I totally agree that the last data load was way better than the previous one. So appreciate all of the effort that went into that. Obviously, there are still bits and bobs that can be improved, and obviously this is a reflection of that. I guess I had a question in terms of everything that you told us today, and the idea that you're going to issue some sample data ahead of the full data load. Is the intention with that sample data that we can load it into the SIT environment? And second to that, do you have a timescale about when that can happen so that people can align resources to look at that?
Yeah, I think the preference would be, Stuart, that you load that into like a PIT environment if you could.
Yeah. Okay.
Because one of the sort of challenges we have is that we're limited to 400 MPANs in SIT B to do settlement testing, because the accuracy reporting that Elexon produce is limited to 400 MPANs. Or if we ended up by sort of loading the data maybe into some of the connected systems, and we end up with additional MPANs then in Helix, that might compromise settlement testing. So okay, ideally we'd ask people to, if they could, to do it in their PIT environments rather than SIT B. Okay.
And in terms of time scales, roughly?
So I think we're just completing the work this this week, and then our offshore team are going to continue work over the Christmas break. So I think we'll be in a position week commencing 6th of January just to confirm what the timescales will be for issuing the test data. But hopefully, we'd be in a position to the following week or the week after at the very latest.
Yeah, I guess it was from purely personal perspective. It was about aligning resources, that having resources available to load that data up and be on standby to investigate any issues that might come out from that in order to feed it back to you. So I just wanted to make sure that we knew roughly when that activity might happen. So
yeah, so I think ideally if we aim for the sort of the third week in January at the latest, if that would help with the planning. But I think we can probably confirm where we are, sort of midweek on the 6th of January in terms of progress.
Yeah. Perfect, thank you.
Because Richard, sorry, I should know this, but when's the actual data load window now for NFR testing from a participant point of view? Yeah,
it's 28th of the 2nd to the and a month on from then, basically.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think if we can look to get obviously the test data out in January, and then obviously it allows several weeks then just to for people to validate the data, and then we're ready then. Obviously we need to set down a bit more detail what we're looking for and when, but obviously we will be following the same approach for NFRs where we load the data into NPRS first, verify that NPRS has been successful before we then provide the data out to everybody else.
Yeah,
I mean, set of data.
So normally we would have the plan was that we were going to have a data working group, I think last week, but because the finalization of the extended settlement dates hadn't been completed, we've delayed that till early next year. So what we'll do prior to the data working group is we'll issue a plan with all those dates, when you'll get the first look at the data, when the data load starts, and when testing starts. So you'll have a very clear plan that you can look at. Anything else? Okay. Well, I appreciate your time and your feedback, and we'll send something out that just sort of captures the key points of the meeting. Cheers. Thanks a lot.